The name of this YouTube channel is called One Story at a Time. And the reason that it's called that is that we are story creatures. We love stories to read. We love stories to watch in movies or in a TV series. And the Bible is full of stories because Jesus has wired our brains to connect with stories. And the Bible is full of amazing stories of how God worked throughout history. And as we look in the New Testament, we see amazing stories of how Jesus brought different groups together. The story of Jesus meeting a Samaritan woman in John chapter 4 at a well, and she ends up trusting him. Or you see how he uses Peter and Cornelius and in time brings them together so the gospel is going to the Gentile world. And how can any of us forget the great story of the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8? Now here is Philip doing an evangelistic campaign in Samaria, and many people are being converted. Now why would God take him away from that great movement to go down to a small road, a desert road, and meet one individual? And who is that one individual? That individual happens to be an Ethiopian eunuch who was on a journey from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. Now let me tell you, it was a long journey, about 2,500 miles. And God in his providence is going to bring these two together on a desert road in Gaza. And this Ethiopian eunuch happens to have a scroll reading Isaiah chapter 53, and he doesn't understand what he's reading. And God is going to send Philip to come alongside the chariot and ask him, hey, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, well, how can I unless someone shows me? And at that moment, Philip is going to show him that passage is talking about the very person of Jesus. And the Ethiopian eunuch receives Christ, and we see that he's also baptized. What an incredible story of God bringing these two individuals together so that the gospel can go forward. Do those things happen today? Are there any amazing stories? Well, we all encounter some great stories, but I'm going to tell you, there's a story that I heard recently that was just like Acts chapter 8. My friend Gary Wheeler had a few hours, and he was going to go to downtown Greenville while he waited for his daughter, and he was going to take these 2 or 3 hours to share the gospel. As he's walking down the street, he happens to see a man who is sitting there on a park bench reading his Bible. He just happens to go up to him and says, sir, do you understand what you're reading? And he didn't. Now, I know it's going to be hard to believe, but he was actually reading the very same passage as the Ethiopian eunuch, Isaiah chapter 53. And he didn't understand what was going on exactly, and Gary was able to sit down with him and share Christ, and he ended up receiving Jesus as his personal Savior. So God is still in the business of bringing people together so that they can hear the good news of Jesus Christ. So I guess the one thing we learned in this story is that Gary was always and is always about sharing the gospel. And amazing stories happen when you're out there in the lane of doing what we're supposed to do. And if you do that and you share the gospel, things are going to happen. And you're going to have stories just like the stories in Acts chapter 8 or John chapter 4 or on the streets of Greenville, South Carolina. And you'll be able to come back and you'll be able to share with others the great things that God is doing, one story at a time.